Domino's started out small, with just one store in Ypsilanti, Michigan in 1960. Fast forward more than 60 years, and Domino's has grown to become one of the most recognized and leading pizza brands in the world. If you believe that entrepreneurs are born, not made, then watch this story unfold and then think again. Because this is the legend of Tom Monahan, the man who triumphed and fought for his vision even when everything around him was falling apart. But how did one man who was living off food scraps become the founder of a now international food chain? How did he revolutionize the pizza delivery industry? And did all this after successive failures and setbacks? Let's find out. In 1937, Tom Monahan was born on St. Patrick's Day in Ann Arbor, Michigan. When Tom was just 4 years old, his father passed away on Christmas Eve. Without his father's support, his mother had to send Tom and his brother away to foster care because she couldn't bear the financial burden of raising them. Already on the first day in his new home, Tom got into a fight and ever since never really felt at home with the other kids.
I got into a fight with one of those guys.
He longed for his mother to come and take him back home. Nearly 7 years later, Tom's mother had become a nurse and was able to provide for her two sons. She moved her family back to Traverse City, where the Monahan brothers started school. At his new Catholic school, Tom met a person who would go on to influence him greatly. That man was Father Russell Pissarro. The father was aware of the Monahan family's difficult situation and gave young Tom odd jobs such as cleaning cars or mopping the floor at a rate of 35 cents an hour. After the 7th grade, Tom moved schools. He was still keen on working and eventually landed a job as a newspaper vendor and got a separate job picking cherries. The latter was tedious and exhaustive. He always felt that the business would be more efficient if they had just shaken the tree and caught the falling cherries in a tarp. It was this first instance where Tom began thinking like an entrepreneur.
Now, well, he's an entrepreneur.
To get a somewhat consistent source of income, he would go fishing and then sell his catch door to door while thinking of other ways to make money. However, as his entrepreneurial prowess grew, his relationship with his mother had crippled, and this had gotten to the point where his mother decided to send Tom and his brother James back to foster care. During the ordeal, Tom moved from one home to another, but ended up landing a job in a bowling alley. He worked from 6:30 a.m. to midnight, 5 days a week. The work was tough, but Tom was resilient, and by the time he was in high school, Tom had moved houses once again. By this time, he found himself in a ramshackle farmhouse with no electricity. During the wintertime, it was freezing cold, and light permeated through the cracks of the walls. Life was difficult. The clothes he wore were grimy and riddled with holes, and his shoes were always filled with manure. While walking to school, he would keep his feet on the floor and hoped no one would notice. One day, while shoveling some manure off his farmhouse, he thought to himself, "How did I get so off track?" It was at that moment that he decided to fulfill his dream of becoming a priest.
I'm going to become a priest.
So he applied to the seminary and was able to only attend after his mother offered to pay up with her savings. Tom felt at home in the priest school and didn't feel homesick like the other boys. He was even a bit mischievous. He would get into pillow fights and would talk in the study hall, but nothing too serious. In less than a year, however, he was expelled from the seminary on the pretense that he didn't have a true calling. In a moment, Tom's dream of becoming a priest was crushed. After the expulsion, he was forced to move back into his mother's home. They argued with each other every day until his mother grew tired and gave up. Without telling Tom, she sent a police officer to pick him up after school and take him to a juvenile delinquent home. Tom recounted the experience, saying, "I felt like a criminal, but had done nothing wrong." Embarrassed, he would take a different route from school to his new home so that his friends would never know. Fortunately, when his aunt and uncle found out, they issued a petition to the court to have him live with them instead. By the time he was accustomed to living with his relatives, Tom didn't care about graduating high school until he saw his aunt making preparations for his graduation.
I wish I was going to your graduation.
Not wanting to disappoint her, he asked his teacher if there was anything that he could do to graduate. His grades were below average, but she gave him the benefit of the doubt and allowed him to graduate last in the class. In his yearbook, he wrote, The harder I try to be good, the worse I get, but I might do something sensational yet. He then attended Fair State College, improved his marks, and applied to a university in Michigan. After being accepted, he realized that he couldn't pay the tuition fee and left to join the Marine Corps. While in the Marines, he made it his mission to improve himself mentally and physically. He started reading inspirational books and imagined himself building an empire. In 1959, Tom was dispatched from the Marines and had $2,000 in savings for his university tuition fee. But he lost every penny of it after meeting a slick businessman who had him fall for a con. With only $15 in his pocket, he hitchhiked from San Diego to Ann Arbor, moved in with his younger brother James, and got a job as a supervisor for a newspaper outlet. He scraped just enough money for his college tuition, but dropped out after just 3 weeks. Tom didn't have enough money for the books and decided that he would try again next year. To make some extra cash, he started selling newspaper subscriptions and ended up getting a lot of customers by offering to deliver the subscriptions directly to them.
Yeah, just for some extra cash.
This experience taught him two things. First, it showed him the appeal of delivering a commodity. And second, that when you see an opportunity, you should take it. When the semester came around, he was able to pay for his tuition and books, but once again, he dropped out. This time because he had too much work on his shoulders that he couldn't make the time to study. Now Tom was a two-time dropout driving a beat-up car. He saw that any dream he had for the future was bleak and unattainable. It is only natural to fall into depression and anxiety when you realize that you have lost everything. But that's when his brother James came to his rescue. He heard that a small store was on the market for a cheap price. It was called Dominos, and it was situated in Ypsilanti near Eastern Michigan University. He asked Tom if he wanted to buy the store with him. They could split shifts so that Tom could make time to study. Tom only had $77 in his bank account, but decided to buy the store with his brother, so he took a $500 loan from the bank. Right after they signed the agreement, James got cold feet and was afraid to leave the security of his job as a mailman. 6 months later, he gave into his fears.
Admits his fears.
After Tom took his first night off, James realized that running the store was too much work and decided to quit. So Tom had no choice but to take over instead of returning to college. At first, he was disappointed, but then realized that his last bit of income was poured into this venture. Since he had nothing to fall back on, Tom chose to keep the shop running, but he made himself a promise, saying that if he was going to run a pizza shop, it would have to be the best in the country. Tom was thinking big, but his new pizza business was far from growing, and he was losing money every week. When he ran out of money, he resorted to eating his own burnt pizzas. Eventually, he became homeless because he couldn't pay his rent, so he ended up living inside his store. His luck seemed to disappear more and more with each passing day. One evening, half of his staff didn't show up to work.
Where is everybody?
The main problem, Tom noted, was that his workforce was spread too thin and his menu offered too much variety. That's when he decided he was going to focus more on quality as opposed to quantity in his pizza. Over the course of the week, he revamped his entire menu and offered only 2 choices of pizza. It ended up becoming one of his most profitable ideas since he took over the small shop. Spurred on by his little success, he focused on keeping his menu simple and delivering free of charge. It was the first pizza store to offer this utility. After the Ypsilanti store became profitable, he decided to open another store in Mount Pleasant near Central Michigan University. But the night he signed the agreement, he lay in his bed and was overcome with dread. Why am I taking a risk on a second store when the first one is doing so well? Tom realized that it was too late to reverse his commitment now and decided to just go with the proposed venture. Not only was the agreement signed, but he had also purchased the equipment. Fortunately for him, it turned out to be a risk that paid dividends.
For all of that, I think it's a risk worth taking.
The new location, along with the first, became the biggest hotspot for pizza in the entire city, and they sold well over 1,000 pizzas each week. A majority of their orders came from students living in the hostels of Central Michigan University. After just a few years, Tom had slowly built his pizza empire much like he had envisioned when he was training with the Marines. After opening up his third store, he received a call from the former owner of his first store, the one he bought with his brother. He told Tom that he wasn't allowed to use the Dominick's name anymore because his customer base was getting confused. So Tom settled on Domino's after one of his drivers, Jim Kennedy, suggested the name after returning from making a delivery. The name change was the least of Tom's problems, however.
Bigger problems if you run out.
Okay.
The more pizza he delivered, the more issues he encountered. It was hard to keep a balance between the ingredients staying moist and the crust staying crispy. To work around this problem, Tom asked a manufacturer to develop a box made of corrugated cardboard that would have holes punched into it so it could retain the heat of the pizza for as long as possible, while not making the pizza get soggy from its own steam. The idea ended up not only being cheap, but also viable for mass production, and it inspired the young entrepreneur to come up with more innovative ideas that would later become industry standards, such as heated pouches and conveyor ovens. In the 1960s, Tom attended a franchise seminar at Boston College, and there he met Ray Kroc, the then CEO of McDonald's. Kroc had turned a small restaurant into one of the biggest fast food franchises the world has ever seen.
Franchise, franchise, franchise.
He inspired Tom to push his ideas further as he began to consider franchising. It was then that he set for himself the lofty goal of opening a new store every week of the year. By 1969, he had nearly met that goal. 32 Domino's had been opened across the states, but against his expectations, all of them failed, and unfortunately, Tom found himself $1.5 million in debt. To evade bankruptcy, he handed over the control of the company to a bank. However, the bank's so-called managerial experts had actually made matters worse. They increased prices and cut back on quality to push sales. By the end of the year, the endeavor was fruitless, and they had given ownership of the company back to Tom. It was in the worst financial shape. The franchisors had filed lawsuits, and the product suppliers hadn't been paid in almost a year.
Well, we want our money.
Tom didn't give up. Slowly but surely, one at a time, Tom reclaimed the trust of his creditors, and within a year, he paid off his debt. And all of the lawsuits and the debt made him realize that he needed to change his business model. Anyone who wanted a franchise no longer had to pay an initial fee. Instead, they had to manage a store successfully for an entire year. Tom's idea not only worked, but also proved to be very successful. By 1983, there were over 1,000 Domino stores across the U.S. The company bloomed even further when Tom introduced his famous 30-minute delivery policy. If customers don't receive their order in 30 minutes, they get their pizza for free. Only 1 year later, Tom opened another 5,000 stores, and Domino's became one of the biggest pizza delivery companies in the entire world, with branches conquering the markets in the UK and Europe. Today, Domino's is worth more than $9 billion and boasts some of the finest pizzas that money can buy. So next time you find yourself enjoying a slice, think back to all the struggles that Tom had to endure for that pizza to get to your doorstep. What is your go-to dish at Domino's Pizza? Or are you more of a Pizza Hut person instead? And what's your favorite part of this exciting business story? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video entertaining or learned something new, please leave a like and tell us what you'd like to see next. Also, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell on your way out so you won't miss out on our next inspiring video. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.